Hello everyone. I'm still unwell at the minute somehow, and I've got a cut above my tongue which is really painful. Like even talking now I can feel it. So I'm uploading another compilation today of my favourite woods and middle of nowhere stories, and I'll be back to normal uploads again on Monday. I hope you're all doing great and I'll speak to you all soon. If you're interested in what I look like in real life, then make sure you check out my Instagram at Joe the Insomniak. Okay, for some quick background, I'm of Mexican descent, and in our culture, the dead and spirits are a big part of our culture as seen by Deli de los Muertos. I butchered that. Now as a kid, my family would always share ghost stories from the old country in Mexico. I would like to share a few if you're willing to listen. This one is from my grandma. She states that when she is a little girl, she saw the devil or some kind of creature imitating it. Back in the 1940s, many families were poor, and I mean really poor. She lived in a poor village in Guerrero, and to go to the bathroom, you literally had to take a trip to the forest, even at night in pitch black darkness, with only the stars and moonlight to guide you. She was there peeing when she walked back home, and she suddenly heard what sounded like a parade of horses coming her way. Of course, that was not possible as it was complete darkness. No one travelled the roads at the time. She saw a figure on top of a single horse, and she said he didn't look up, just told her something and kept going before disappearing quickly after. When she arrived home, her mother saw her hair standing up on end. Now this meant that there was some kind of evil presence in her village. And now another story. She encountered the famous weeping woman, La Lorena, in a similar situation while out in the woods at night. She said a woman who was half white and half shadow was walking down a dirt road while crying, giving out lament sounds. She couldn't see her face and she didn't seem to have any legs. Now this is my mother and father. In Mexico and other places in Latin America, there are many accounts of gnomes and evil nature spirits such as shapeshifters, forest imps, and fairies. My mother told me the story of her sister who had a baby daughter one night. My aunt was sleeping. They lived in a village near forest, and apparently she saw a little child walk around making noises. She had a young son, but he was sleeping in his room. This girl was a newborn child, and shouldn't be able to walk yet. She had no idea whose child this was. She called the child thinking it was her son, and it ran towards her room and under her bed. When she looked down getting ready to scold this child, which she thought was her son playing in the late hours of night, there was nothing there. In Mexico, it is believed that gnomes can kill and take the souls of children. This almost happened to my father. He was getting ready at my grandmother's house playing in the yard as a kid. Apparently they were going out later, but she had many trees. When suddenly he saw a bunch of children on the tree top calling his name, gesturing him to come up. His grandma said that he could play with kids, but of course, she saw nothing up there and held him inside because she knew what it was. She said some prayer completely freaking my dad out and said he's not allowed to go outside again. In another instance, though, unfortunately, he was playing with his baby cousin sitting in a baby chair when suddenly his cousin just dropped her head like that and went to sleep and passed away. My dad called over his aunt, and when examining her, they found marks on her neck, as though she's attacked by an unseen force. My mother said that her father and a neighbour were enemies, but there was something about this neighbour that scared the locals. There were many rumours and claims that he was a Nahual, but this is so. Apparently when the house was sold, they found hidden within a book of spells, witchcraft and Satanism, and other horrible stuff. Finally, the last story to tell, it involves ghosts from the Mexican Revolution. My mother was a young girl. This is basically a repeat of my grandmother's story, where she went out to use the bathroom at night, and when she looked up, she saw a man dressed in Revolutionary era clothing sitting on a rock. No one was out at those times. He had an old Mexican Revolution type sombrero, and just looked in my mum's direction but had no face, just a silhouette. She got up as fast as she could and ran back inside. It is said in her village that a Mexican Revolutionary guerrero soldier was executed in that spot, hanging from a tree. This was common in the time, as most revolutionaries were either hung or had a firing squad execute them. I've had very weird experiences before. Now, I'm not from Sierra Nevada, but far north of that. I spend the majority of my free time in the summer hiking, camping and fishing. I'm familiar with the area, the wildlife and ecosystem in general. I haven't posted anything like this just because I've never had the reasons to, but I had a weird feeling once and a strange reaction with my dog. Now, the dog's a very experienced dog who's quite large. He's a male and about 130 pounds. Nothing scares him. I've literally seen him square off with a mountain lion and not react. Now, it was on the smaller side, but still a juvenile male. With a couple of good growls and posturing on my dog's side, it sent the cat running. Now, I had another in the same area, would hear it crying. It seems to have come from the tree line at about dusk, and the dog quickly scared it off in the same fashion. So it does not get spooked, is what I'm saying. But there's been a couple of times where he and I are out hiking, and the woods suddenly go dead silent. Normally I'm assuming it's a predator or something, or maybe people. But those couple of odd times where he's completely fearless normally and happy, he suddenly whimpers and cowers next to me, standing on edge, clearly terrified. I should mention that a dog that size leaning on me can make me sort of want to fall over. He's nearly sent me down the side of a mountain before. Now, when this happened once, I heard a strange clicking sound that I couldn't explain. It's almost like it sent shudders through my body. But I'm not talking about a fear, like actual shudders, like when a sound's so loud that it passes through you. The one time this happened, I literally sprinted for my life. And it was almost like the second I passed a certain tree, the sound immediately continued like nothing had changed. That's the part that scares me the most. How can the sound turn off then on again so suddenly? I wouldn't have been so terrified if my dog wasn't so afraid, but that's what freaks me out. It was our second year in our new home in the suburbs, specifically in the Philippines, Cagayan de Oro City. I was 8 years old at the time when I first discovered that things I thought could just exist in stories were actually true, and I experienced it. It was a Sunday afternoon, and when we are told to get our butts moving because we're going to go to the mall, I'm really excited and happy that after a long weekend, I got to spend a day at the mall playing at the arcade, so normally I would get excited and active. I took a shower and was so loud and noisy that little did I know, things were about to go wrong. I was asking my babysitter if she saw where my shirt had gone, and she pointed to the left side. And when I tried to look towards where my shirt was, my head slightly tilted to the right. Now, it didn't bother me at first. I tried to move my head straight, but as to my inconvenience, a very sharp pain took to my neck, and slowly I couldn't do anything but tilt my head to the right. I shout to everyone in the house for help, and the babysitter rushes over to me. At first I thought she's going to take this as a joke, but she realizes I'm in pain. So what we did was went to my grandmother's sister to check on me, and she replied that it's him ma Dwian, and was annoyed by my antics and that I was being too noisy, so slapping me was enough to make me realize my rudeness. A small dwarf-like creature in the Filipino folklore. From what I remembered, there were two types of them, the one that is mostly good and evil being the other, and to my stupid luck, I annoyed the bad one. After we visited my grandmother's sister, we eventually went to the mall and ate at KFC. I specifically remembered what I ate, and it was spaghetti. After that we went home. A few days later, I could tilt my head a little bit more to the other side and look like a normal person. My mum heard what was happening to me and told my babysitter to offer a black native chicken as a peace offering. Then a day later, things go back to normal. After the encounter, we let our house be blessed by a Magamat, which is a witch doctor that specialized on dealing with things instead of hurting them. And nothing bad or paranormal happened since then. For my entire childhood, my father and I used to take late night walks due to his insomnia from shift work. Our neighbourhood is considered to be very safe, and ultimately was an urban neighbourhood besides one of the roads towards the back of the neighbourhood being lined with a thick forest for about 1.25 miles deep, which made a circle back on itself. All of these walks are very dear memories of mine, except for one, and it ended being the last one. Along the road with the tree line, there was a slight tree light to illuminate a small plot of land that somebody owned but was very overgrown and ill-kept. It was very common for us to walk this road to enjoy the sounds of the forest, the lack of illumination, and the ease of circling back. One ordinary night, as we are walking and making conversation, my father abruptly stops, pulls me closer, puts a hand over my mouth, crouches with me, and points towards a single illuminated plot roughly 100 yards away. At first, I don't see anything. I think he's pulling my leg, but as I began to look into the forest, I see a very small humanoid figure, roughly 3 feet in height, scrawny with long limbs. It almost materialized out of the bush line and cautiously takes in its surroundings before signaling towards the bush. After a few seconds, 2 other small humanoid figures materialize as well. After a brief moment of what looked to be a discussion, all 3 make a dash for the tree line. Once this happened, my father picked me up, threw me on his shoulder, and we make a break for home, which is about 1/2 mile away. Now my dad is 6'5", 220 pounds, but I'm only 120. He literally never showed a sign of slowing down. That's how scared he was. And after that night, we never took late night walks again. Instead, installed 4 bright motion detection lights on our porch. The few times I brought it up, he says he doesn't want to talk about it. Those figures still give me chills, and the image of those 3 huddling together is very vivid 15 years on. I didn't see anything, but I've had a few weird experiences out in the woods. I live near the Eastern Sierra Nevada mountains. I hike up there pretty much from May to October. A few years ago, I decide to hike this pretty strenuous trail that leads to a huge rock slide. I park and notice that I'm the only person there. I have 2 dogs, get them out and start to go up the trail. About a mile in, I come to this clearing that has a huge teepee-like structure in it. The trees are woven together. I put down my walking stick and start taking pictures. There's a weird tall sapling that seems to be bent almost backwards that's woven in. I move up the trail after the pictures, and as soon as I walk past the tree structure, I immediately felt like I'm being watched, and the woods went silent. It was so weird. No bugs, no birds, no small animal sounds, dead silent. I hike by myself all the time and don't get scared or creeped out easily. I've seen bears and I'm pretty sure there's cougars up there. I keep going up and the feelings are getting worse now, being way more intense, and my dogs are acting weird. These are experienced trail dogs that don't really get weird like that. They always stay super close to me, not making a lot of noise. I realise that I've left my walking stick down by a tree structure. Oh well. I don't want to go back down there to get it. I got a quarter of a mile or so past the tree line now, and the feeling of being watched is unbearable. I'm thinking, okay, rationally, it's probably a big cat, so I head back down. The rational part of my brain is slowing down now. My fight response? Nah. I go full speed down at a 30 or 40 degree slope. I get down the tree structure and meadow and I look down where my walking stick is. It's gone. Like it's nowhere to be seen. It was pretty distinct too because it's made of aspen. I picked it up somewhere else and there's no aspen in this forest. I'm terrified. I kept running. I felt like I was being chased, but I never saw anything. Never heard anything either. Yeah, it could have been a big cat, but why did it only start after I passed the tree structure? And how did my stick go missing? I was nearly to the parking lot before the feeling of being watched finally left me. And I will never go back up there, not even in a group. I still get chills when I think about this. When I was about 7 or 8, every morning when I would wake up, I would go into my grandma's room and lay in bed with her until she got up. One morning, I go in, get some blankets and lay down with her, when I look over to the dresser, and in front of the closet, I kid you not, there's 2 6 to 8 inch men. I just stared at them and froze because I was terrified. I finally closed my eyes hard and hoped they would go away. After a couple of seconds, I opened them up and they're gone. I always wondered if what I saw in my mind was real, but I can picture it so vividly. Even what they were wearing. One had a red shirt, one had an orange shirt, and to this day, I'm now terrified of gnomes. Like I get sweaty palms and like flashbacks, almost like I had PTSD. I work for a small technical consulting firm. We have about 10 employees and 2 owners. Most of us are usually on site with clients full time. In some cases though, we have in-house work jobs that require us to go and work from the home office. My last gig ended and I had to go to the home office. Home office is a gorgeous, completely updated building 50 miles out from the city in a small farm country set about a mile back on a huge hill with a long driveway which is the only way in and out. The building is mostly glass and parking is right behind the building, so I can literally turn around and see where my car is from where I sit. The office overlooks a driveway, so you can see anyone driving up, and mostly delivery guys. At first, it was really peaceful being out here. I'm an early bird, so it was a pleasant drive out in farm country. I didn't have to lock my car doors like I did when I worked downtown. I could gaze out my window at gorgeous green fields, but honestly, it got lonely, which is why when UPS would show up with a package, I'd jump up to meet the delivery guy. Point being, I'm hyper aware of who's there. Some days, I would be the only person in the office. Some days there are 3 or 4 other co-workers in between assignments or working on short in-house work. One morning, it was just me and the other co-worker here. This particular co-worker and I would walk down the long driveway and back once a day to get some steps in. We did this particular morning and came back into the building. A few minutes later, he looks over at me and says, "Look at our cars." Now we had only just walked past our cars a few minutes prior. Now all of our doors to our vehicles were open. All 4 doors on each of our vehicles. I hadn't heard a thing. No one had come up to us. The nearest farm was 12 miles away, and my co-worker certainly hadn't done it. He was sitting 10 feet away from me the entire time. Someone had walked through miles upon miles of cornfields just to mess with our cars? And leave, not even take anything. Heck, my co-worker even had his iPad on the front seat. We looked around, closed the doors, locking them, and went back inside the building. I have this horrible feeling when I'm alone in there now. It just doesn't make sense to me. I've never experienced anything like this. This happened to me about a week ago. I found a summer job at our local supermarket, and about 2 weeks in, I got asked to work late shift. I accepted since I was in need of money and never slept early. Everything was fine and dandy until about 3 AM, when a shirtless, scared up guy came in. After lingering around the store for a while, he quickly came up to the counter, making instant eye contact with me, and as I was about to ask him if he needed any help, he whispers, "Don't you dare move." I didn't answer him at first, so I asked him if he can repeat. At that point, he got agitated and yelled, "Don't make another sound or I'll cut you up, okay?" In a swift motion, he vaulted over the counter going to the alcohol section, tried to grab a bottle of whiskey to hit me with, but thankfully, the owner hid a baseball bat under the counter. The moment he turned his back on me, I whack him full force in his knee. He winces in pain trying to get up. I winded my bat again, acting like I'm gonna hit him, just to see him pull out a homemade shiv of sort. I let him get up. The moment he got up, he swung at me, lightly lacerating my wrists. I pushed him back with my baseball bat, and he ran for the door and got out. The other day, I called the police showing them the security footage, but they haven't contacted me since. I think it's safe to say that I won't be working the late shift again for a long time. I'm just really glad that guy didn't cut an artery or something. If I wasn't so aware and didn't have the baseball bat, I know the situation could have ended in a far worse fashion. A few years ago, during what was probably the darkest period in my life, I worked overnights at a local Walmart. 6 days a week. I would spend 9 PM to 7 AM stocking anything from fishing laws to make up. I've never been to a more depressing environment. Everyone was really apathetic and too caught up in their own depressing lives to care about anyone else, including the managers. Walmarts have a generally wild, weird vibe to them anyway, but this was a 24-hour supercenter in rural Western Virginia, so you can imagine the characters, the meth and opioid addicts mostly, that would show up throughout the night. We had no security guards, and from what I've come to understand, a lot of cameras haven't worked properly in a while. Being one of the few young female overnight stalkers, I've encountered my fair share of unwanted advances, but the one who took the cake was the guy who showed up every time I went outside for a smoking break, regardless of the time. 2 AM, 4 AM, 6, doesn't matter. The dude would appear around the corner, trying to strike up a conversation within seconds of me stopping outside. It didn't matter what entrance I used, they're always there. At first, I assumed he worked there. I mean, why else would someone voluntarily lurk around a crappy Walmart this late? Pretty much everyone on the night shift during their 2 nightly 50-minute breaks wouldn't encounter him. Maybe the timing's a coincidence, but no, I came to find out he doesn't even work there, even though he often wore a dark blue t-shirt like that of an overnight employee. I stopped going outside alone and would only venture outside with one of my guy friends, particularly one I've been friends with since middle school. Even their presence doesn't deter him, and it became a store-wide joke. I was weirded out, but not alarmed until he started getting a little more aggressive. He'd ask me if I was seeing anyone, and would ask me out. Pretty much every chance he got. I was playing Grand Theft Auto 5 at the time, so I came up with a story about my scary long-distance boyfriend Trevor from Northern California. Even then, he wasn't fazed. I was really annoyed though and started ignoring him. Now one night when my main guy friend had called in sick and the others were working on something on the opposite side of the store, I went outside with 2 older women in my area. After a few minutes they went inside, and just as I was about to follow them, Walmart creeper suddenly appeared and insisted on going to his car with me. He then literally tries grabbing me by my hand. I rip it away from him and lose it, sprinting inside. I report him to the head manager that night and found out that he had a cousin who worked in there. Apparently he likes to hang out with his cousin. The cousin apologizes profusely. The management's on a whole nother level of crappy and doesn't do anything. They don't even ban him or say anything. I ended up quitting specifically because of this. I found out through a friend that the guy who was still hanging out at the store every night still does this and creeps on other weird women. Apparently he tried like hell to learn my name and where I lived, stalking me for months after. Apparently he was literally constantly upset that I wasn't there before disappearing without a trace. I can't help but think about how crappy the cameras were, and why oh why I couldn't have just had better security and taken me more seriously. So I have a good friend that I work with. I've known her for 15 years, and for the sake of this story, we'll call her M. We work at a restaurant/theatre together, and often after our shift, we go to a local bar to have a drink and a talk. The bar has your usual crowd of guys looking to hit on pretty girls, though, and we often have to tell people to leave us alone. M's not the best though. She can't always do that well. She often gets sucked into having conversations with weirdos, if no one is around to rescue her polite awkwardness. This happened to be the case a few nights ago. An older man approaches us and it seems harmless at first. She was alone reading and he was a professor that was drawn to people that seemed to be more intellectual. He claimed to be a regular guy at the bar and just wanted to get out and talk to feel less lonely. She pitied him and decided to be friendly. As the night progressed and he became more intoxicated, he starts saying stranger things, complimenting M, saying things that make her feel weirded out. He mentioned something along the lines of, "I have a lot of money in my bank," and insinuated that it had been obtained illegally. Maybe he secretly sold drugs or something. All I know is that it sounded weird. He's a biochemistry professor too, apparently. Doesn't add up. M decided to head out, and she'd hoped that she wouldn't see him at the bar again for a while, but M saw him very shortly thereafter, and not at the bar but at our restaurant. She mentioned where she had worked to him by accident and forgotten about it. This man came to where she worked without invitation to talk to her. Like I mentioned before, we worked at a restaurant/theatre, and on the day that he came in, she was working at the bar, behind the desk where all the movies are. In order for customers to walk back there, they have to show their tickets. He didn't have a ticket, and he told the ticket man that he was M's uncle coming to say hello. And the ticket man lets him through, not saying anything. He went up to her and started trying to have a casual conversation with her. She was in shock that he found her at work and wondered how he could be there. She politely tries to brush him off and pretended to be busy, hoping he'd leave. He doesn't. He hung around waiting for a minute to talk to her. She tells the managers about it and one of them came to the rescue, taking him out. Later one night, she was at the bar across the street again and mentioned to this bartender who didn't seem to be surprised. Apparently, it's not the first time that he's been weird like this when girls are there. He's also done this to other girls, literally following them. Maybe this is just some really old lonely person desperate for money or companionship. Maybe he's just socially awkward. But I don't know, it just doesn't seem right pretending you're someone's uncle to try and get closer to them. I hope he doesn't show up again. It's really shook my friend up and I don't like it. I work as a cashier at a grocery store, and nothing about this night would have stuck out to me if it wasn't for this event. I had till 7 PM to close shift, and the store closed at 12 AM. I clock in, and everything's the same old. However, early in my shift, I had a younger guy, probably mid-20s, come in. He grabs a soda from the cooler. Nothing special that sticks out in my mind. So my break time comes around 9 PM. I go to the back to lock out, and then head out. I go to call my boyfriend at the time, and as I'm walking out, I saw the same younger guy that I rang up the soda for over an hour ago at the lottery ticket machine. Okay, whatever. He's bored. It's not uncommon to see the same customer coming back for a second time. I make my call, and my break's about to go up, so I clock back in. I get on my lane and look over to the lottery machine and he's gone. Fast forward about 30 minutes before closing, I'm cleaning up. And guess who I see over at the same machine? Yep, shady soda guy. We make brief eye contact and he walks out the store. Over the next 15 minutes, I get so busy cleaning and making sure that the store is ready for the day shift that I forget all about the soda guy. Time to clock out, so I do so. I usually wait and walk out with the office checker and the security guard, but on this particular shift, I don't know the security guard and don't care too much for the office checker on duty, so I walk out without waiting. As I get out, I head to my minivan. As per company policy, I had to park at the end of the lot so customers can get closer to the store. As I make it halfway to my van, I see a weird blacked out car taking up 2 spaces in front of my van. And there's another in the distance. I start walking up faster with my key in hand. As I get closer to the car, I see 4 people in the car, then 2 doors open, and somebody steps out, wearing all black, the soda guy. By the grace of God, or whatever you believe in, before they fully got out the car, the security officer checker come walking out of the store, and they quickly get back in their car, literally speeding off. I don't even see a license plate. The security guard stopped and looked at me like he didn't know what was going on. I was freaking out, so rushed the rest of the way home, crying my eyes out. My brain, even after all these years, doesn't know how to process this. Was I overreacting? Was I about to be abducted? I still don't like thinking about it because it makes me tear up. At about 8 PM last night, I was walking with a friend of mine, Sally, about a mile to the closest cafe. With both girls in our late 20s, neither of us drive. Sally didn't have her Opal card, which is the Australian version of an Oyster card. So walking, that's our only option. It's summer over here, so it was fairly well lit, and we're both walking down the main roads and not too concerned. When we finally arrive at this cafe and sit down, now I was paying with my credit card, and sure enough, it was cash only. Sally was on the phone when I got back from the counter, so I just gestured her to stay put and guard while I went to get the cash out. This is my home suburb, so I know there's ATMs around, and my best bet is a gas station about a block away. Now I'm doing a light jog so I don't keep Sally waiting, when a balding sweaty guy, probably in his late 40s with a tank top and no shoes, comes facing behind me as I pass the corner of the block. He walked for about 100 meters. I really don't think much of it. The gas station was the next building along, and it seemed like he'd just come out of a nice suburban house along the street, and it's not the witching hour, so I just assume he's going to the gas station as I am. He didn't even cross my mind as I entered this tiny convenience store, nor did he follow me in. In my peripheral vision, I saw him walk past the door and out of sight. I look around for an ATM that they have inside sometimes. No luck. So I go up to this man in his late 30s, at the desk, reluctantly asking if they do a cash out. He smiles and says of course, saying who's with you. I have no idea who he's talking about at first, but he then points to the man from earlier, pacing around outside the store. Keep in mind, he didn't look at all menacing. He wasn't going back and forth just outside the door. He was just drifting in space outside, from the pavement to the gas pumps to the storefront, seemingly aimlessly. Maybe he's on drugs. I tell the clerk no, not thinking much of it, and he says, he was staring at you before, and I thought maybe he's your father. I laugh it off. I wasn't concerned at all. He was still ambling around outside. I couldn't imagine him having a fixed gaze on anything. I thanked the clerk for the cash, but before I turn away he says, "Just wait and see if he leaves." We wait for a few minutes in silence, and the guy begins to pace back and forth directly against the front wall of the store, looking straight ahead, but never in. It still looked like the man was just a drug addict, and seemed harmless. Not once did I catch his gaze, so I figure it's safe to slip out, where it's starting to become dusk and kind of bright. Sally was texting me, "Where are you?" I thank the guy at the desk again for his concern, assure him that I don't know the guy and am not involved in some weird scheme to rob the store. The clerk asks if I want him to walk out with me. I say that it should be alright, and begin walking away from the block. As I leave the store though, the drifting man stops pacing and makes a beeline for me from the other end of the building. I seriously don't think much of the guy at all up until this point, but now he's powering towards me. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I start to power walk so he doesn't think I'm actively trying to escape him, still trying to convince myself that I'm being paranoid and should be more casual. I don't look behind me to see how close he is. I reach the pavement on the other side of the gas pumps when I hear the clerk outside. He's yelling at me, "Run!" I make a break for it, looking over my shoulder. He grabbed the man from behind. The balding man isn't even glancing behind him or trying to escape. He's literally just staring at me, running away with this death stare. I kept running until I crossed the road and then turned around, but still standing. The clerk is holding on to the man. The clerk and I are just looking at each other in pure bewilderment, not really knowing what to do. He makes a hand gesture to go and I wave thanks. I go back to Sally and we rush home a complete different way. It's a really weird experience. I'm just thankful that the gas station worker was so kind and caring. When I was younger, I worked at a gas station as an attendant. I was really hoping to do a good job to impress my supervisors, but I had a few things go wrong what made him lose faith in me. One of the scariest moments was a crazy local drove down by the station, hid in the bushes, and literally started shooting the pumps. My boss is convinced he's aiming for me, but it seemed like I was an unintended target, that he was actually trying to shoot the supplies. Paint cans and oil cans suffer the most damage. I can't figure out why on earth he was trying to do this. He is a real nutcase. I was lucky that the whole thing didn't blow up that day. Freaking crazy. This happened about 6 months ago, and it's really been bugging me since. This will be long, but I must set the scene. So my family has a cabin we've had since the 60s, and I've been going there my entire life throughout the years. It's nestled in a little town of less than 2,000, surrounded in vast forest and farmland. You see cows everywhere and stray dogs that let you stroke them. You'll maybe see 30 people in a day if you go into the little town and shops around. Definition of a small country town for sure. Since I spent my entire life there, I know pretty much everyone. All my family knows everyone. Men dressed in western clothes with big jeans and old flannel shirts and belts with big buckles. Women dressed in jeans and tank tops with country factory logos on them. They're all nice enough and keep to themselves. So I'm driving up there one night to meet my parents since they had been gone the night previously to open the cabin for spring. My boyfriend has also flown in so he can finally meet my family up there. I'd been driving until it got dark. About a 2-hour and 10-minute drive from my house, and he had been taken over driving from around 10. There's a little national park close by, about 15 miles of total land. Since I'd fallen asleep and couldn't give directions, he decided to log the address into the GPS. It took him through the back way through the park that I never drive through. So when he woke me up to ask me where the next turn is since the GPS said he couldn't go either way, it took me a minute to figure out where the hell are we. There were no lights anywhere, and we're the only car for about 15 miles. There's long forest with tall giant trees on either side of the road, with a lonely deer or two in the woods to keep us company. I mentioned switching drivers because I remembered that road, which would lead directly into the intersection that would go through a small community up to the mountain by my cabin. But it was prime. Leave a tow baby on the side of the road and kidnap someone when they check it out territory. It was dark enough that the forest was thick enough that we joked some cult members are probably there. Hell, maybe they are. Needless to say, we decided stopping isn't a good idea. We eventually passed through a small clearing/intersection with a dinky concrete building on the side of the road with one light on, and a car pulled in the slanted gravel ground. My boyfriend drives forward. He then sees that there's 2 people there. My gut immediately twisted, and I start to feel sick. Sick enough to feel ice cold sweat running through my hair, and my veins now are pumping through to my stomach. You never see people at night here, and it's 2 teen boys in fact, wearing nice clothes, Nike shorts and obnoxiously coloured sport workout clothing, aka very out of place, like something's wrong. They see us coming and walk away from what appears to be an old beat up car, probably from the 1960s, and it's important to note that this was completely gone of any paint and rusting. They smile at us and wave. I don't have a clue who these people are, and I'm starting to hear noises around us. I knew a gas station was right up the road from us. They could have just walked from there, but there's no lights up the road and no reason to be here. The building around us is abandoned, but there's a light on the wall. I'm starting to think these are in on it. They walk out onto the road, almost blocking my boyfriend from going forward, who had to slow down continuously not to hit them. Suddenly the light goes out in the building. They constantly wave their arms and smile at us, saying something that we can't hear. We think about stopping but decide it's stupid to. My boyfriend quickly drove around them, slamming on the gas, trying to calm me down since the whole scene scares the life out of me. Images of getting out of the car and something stranger or worse happening flew through my head. I look behind us and they're suddenly angry, staring at us, not moving an inch, and the light flickers on in the background in the building. Who are those kids? Why were they wearing city clothes? They looked too young to be driving. I know it wasn't their car. And who was in the building? We finally made it out and found the intersection we wanted that led to the familiar gas station, and he didn't hesitate when I said I need to drive next. About 10 or so minutes later we get to the cabin and explain what happened, and my parents are terrified. God knows what would have happened if we had stopped and actually got out. I don't like to think of it. A little over a year ago, I worked at a gas station. It's one of those 24/7 ones with a mini mart inside of it, and I worked the evening shift. Now, I saw and dealt with a lot of messed up things in that store, which just led me to roll my eyes when people were doing or saying creepy stuff. Hell, if I had $1 for every time I was threatened with death, I'd be retired now. So one night, I was out in the store restocking shelves when one of the regulars came in and started talking to me. He was a full-blown druggie. He would have been in his 50s. And he was tweaking while sitting on me. By this point, I'm used to weird stuff and ignore it. He said some messed up things to me though. Something about what he wanted to do with me. I zoned in and out of what he was saying. It wasn't uncommon for him to ramble about weird acts and other gross things. I tell him that I have to get back behind the counter because my co-worker needs me to make coffee for a customer. He was a bit irritated but said that he would talk to me later and left the shop. After making coffee, I had to restock drinks, but the day team hadn't emptied the trolleys of boxes, so I took out the boxes to the big bin. The bin is located on another side of the store, but there's no cameras, so people inside the store can't see you there. That used to make me nervous, but I had been there longer than some of the people who had come through, and was used to the environment. As I was throwing the boxes in the bin, the tweaking guy from before comes up to me, grabs my arm. I tried to play it off like he's goofing around and laugh and say something like, "Hey, I know you like me, but you can't do that. My husband's gonna get mad." Sounds like I wasn't trying much, but with people like him, it was best to remain friendly. The last time someone was more firm, he got knocked out by a right hook, and I was a lucky girl who got to witness it and call the police. He then gets angry and says, "I told you I was gonna have my way with you." Now, I've stopped smiling and I'm scared. He shoves me against the bin and goes to unbuckle his belt when glass smashed. One of my favourite customers was across the road at a pub and saw him go straight for me, knowing his reputation, knowing something bad was happening. And when he saw what was going on, he smashes a bottle over his head. Cops were called and I don't see him again. As for the guy who saved me, I'd given him free coffee for a month. I refused outright to take out the boxes now. I'm just glad I got off okay and was saved that day. Probably the weirdest thing that happened to me in my life was when I was driving to a gas station one night. Now, I was on a very long road trip at the time, heading from college to home. I literally had to drive hundreds of miles, and I'm in the middle of the backwoods, not seeing cars or buildings for miles. I'm starting to get worried because of how low my gas is running. I'm really thinking that I'm gonna have to tent it out here in the middle of the night or something, the last thing that I want to be doing. And hey, did I forget to mention that I'm terrified of the woods? Just as I'm thinking this, I decide to switch on the radio to try and calm my nerves. Even worse, they're playing ABBA songs. I really don't like ABBA songs, and I continue going. Luckily for me though, I've got the moonlight to help guide me, even though that my headlights aren't doing much to penetrate the woods. We're now entering the dangerously low gas territory, and I'm worried. But lo and behold, what do I see? An old gas station up ahead. Ah, thank God. I think to myself. I was getting worried there. I pull into the gas station and stop for a second before getting out. I have a really weird feeling. I know it's quiet where I'm driving, but it's just far too quiet up here. I look around and don't see anyone. There's no one near the counter either, and it looks abandoned almost. I then hear a voice on the intercom. Yeah, just go pump your gas, we'll help you in a minute. In a horrible raspy old voice. Now the very second that I go to unlock my door, all of the lights shut off. I know it's not a power outage either, but I can still hear the sounds of the intercom not being turned off fully. Needless to say, I turn my engine key. I'm shaking so much I can't even put it into gear. Not to worry, adrenaline takes over, and I speed up to 60 like I've never drove so quick in my life, and don't bother looking back. As I've been driving for about half a minute, I can see lights in the distance behind me. I'm scared to look. Turns out, all of the lights are on again in the gas station. I have no idea what happened that day, or what they were planning to do with me. Things I do know for a fact though is that they purposely turned off the lights and were purposely waiting for someone to come there. And I also know that there was no help or way to find me if anything happened out there. My family loves to go on vacation in Sweden, and my grandmother even has a cottage in the forest that all the family members use if they want. A couple of years ago when I was 20, I was on vacation there with my mum and grandma sometime in autumn for about 10 days. This is a Swedish backwoods. We go there to unwind, to enjoy nature and take a rest from civilization. Hiking, canoeing, and looking for stuff, sitting around the campfire, and just them sorts of things. It's not completely isolated. You can find some villages and fields here and there. It's definitely very rural though, so you don't have much of a chance of encountering other people. Now, I've always liked to go exploring on my own, finding out the new paths through the woods, fixing our old maps to reflect the landscape better. The maps you can buy of this area haven't been updated for years, and many paths don't even exist anymore due to overgrowth. What I also like to do is explore old abandoned buildings, and rural Sweden's great for this. Back in the 1800s, Swedish people in the countryside were dirt poor and starving, so many moved to the New World for a better life. You can still find the foundations of farmhouses, even foundations of entire villages in the woods, sometimes with rusted 100-plus-year-old farm equipment. Also, like so many countries, Sweden has an issue with rural exodus nowadays, with middle-aged and young people moving away to cities. Old people stay out there until they die, and no one buys their houses until they're literally just sitting there abandoned. This means a lot, so you can find many empty houses in the forest, and I just love exploring them. Most of them have already been looted, presumably by hunters, loggers or hikers, but sometimes you can find interesting things. Now, one crisp autumn day, I took one of our bicycles, a map, and something to eat and drink. Told my mum and grandma I wanted to be back by nightfall, and at the latest, would be set out to explore there. On the map I had chosen, there's a wide loop that I guess would take about 3 hours if the paths were clear, and didn't stop to explore. But even if I did, I guess I had plenty of time until dusk. I had a lot of fun at first, driving the mountain bike down smaller and smaller forest paths, finding foundations of old buildings and some root cellars that were still intact and some mushrooms. I have some problems with the map though. Like I said, many paths that are still on the map don't exist anymore, so I had to turn back a few times, but mostly I had a pretty good idea of where I was. Of course, that made it all take longer than I anticipated, and when I reached the furthest point of the loop and turned into a path that, according to the map, would take me back and add an hour, the sun's already setting now. At this point, I'm already feeling a bit uneasy. I have to admit, because of my bad time management and because I was worried that I could trust the map even less than I thought. And shortly before turning onto the path, I found some traps in the woods that kinda creeped me out. 3 big cages, each with a platform in the middle that was connected to a steel door in front. On those platforms were some kind of animal remains, rotted black things with bones sticking out, etc. But it hadn't been touched, I guess, since the doors were still open. I had taken a stick and deactivated the traps by pushing onto the platform through the cage bars. When the doors had snapped shut, it was so loud that I flinched. Now, as clumsily as I was cycling along on the uneven ground, I realised the sun's setting. I had this uncomfortable feeling that everything around me was sort of aware, if that makes sense. It wasn't the feeling of being watched, not quite yet. It just felt like I had to try and be quiet now, somehow. After a while, I came upon a crossroad in a more open area where I was supposed to follow the path straight. The trees were not so high here, and I guessed it had just been one of the clearings created by a severe storm years ago. At that crossroad was a tiny wooden building, somewhere between a shed and a cabin. I had originally set out to find abandoned houses so far, and I've only seen a couple of foundations. So even though at this point I should have turned back, curiosity gets the better of me. I want to check if this was locked and if I could take a peek inside. It's not locked, but the door was kind of stuck in the frame for a moment until I could tear it loose. Inside the cabin was a cot, a tiny oven, a mass of taxidermy animals that I've never seen before. They've even taxidermy animals on the cot and on the oven, now to the walls and ceiling, and the entire inside of the cabin, every inch of it's covered in a layer of black mold. It was so much that some of the animals were there and you couldn't really tell what they were anymore, only guess from the shape. They all looked monstrous covered in that stuff, and the smell was overwhelming. I quickly tried to close the door again, but the wood had warped so much it's not possible, so I left it hanging to get out of there. As I was cycling away from the cabin, I felt so strange. This time, I did feel like I was being watched, and was nonsensially thinking, you should have closed that door. I don't know why I thought that, but it made me uneasy to think the shed door's open. I told myself I'm being silly, because why would it matter? Obviously no one's using it anymore. And about 10 minutes later, the path entered a stretch of older woods with much higher trees. The sun was now close to the horizon, the skies full of orange light. Under the fir trees, it was already getting very dark. I checked my phone to tell my mum that I'm maybe going to be late, but there's no reception. A couple more minutes into the dark forest and the path disappeared. At this point, I have two options. Try and push through with my bike until I met a logging road that was hopefully on the other side of that stretch of woods and it can take me back. Or return. Go past the mold shed again and try go back the other way. Basically, the second option was not an option for me. As I already said, I kind of had to zigzag and improvise even to come this far because the map's wrong in every place seemingly. Going all the way back is a perfect way to get lost out there in the dark. But also, I really don't want to go past the shed again. And now I have a sudden aversion to look behind me. As dusk was creeping through the forest, I was getting really paranoid at this point. The uneasy feeling crystallized into the idea that I've disturbed something there. Because I've left the door open, it's following me. I know it's stupid, but I can't shake the feeling. Going back past the shed, past those traps, and then through the ruins of that old village, past the open mouths of the root cellars in the dark, getting lost in there with the feeling of something possibly on my trail. No way I'm going back. You might even get lost trying to go through the woods in front of me. And I would have to push, maybe even carry my bike. For the woods don't seem to stretch too far in front of me, only left and right, so it seemed like the better option. I was just hoping at this point the supposed logging road on the other side's still there. After tearing through some barbels for a bit, I found what I guess might be the remnants of the old path, because the ground was sort of lower there, and I tried to follow that until I come upon another set of ruins. The foundations of some farmhouse presumably. Behind that, the ground slopes down into a marshy area with birches that seem very white in the gloom under the trees. At this point, I stopped to listen. I still don't want to turn around. I couldn't hear anything, but the feeling of being watched, being alone, only increases at this point, and I felt like something was coming for me. But like the forest itself was somehow aware of my presence, listening, watching, like it was being deliberately quiet. I was feeling so scared that I didn't even try and talk myself out of the feeling anymore. I just accept it as what I'm dealing with now. I had some leftover food in my backpack, half a sandwich and some sesame snacks. And then, the mushrooms I found earlier. I took it all out, laying it on a stone, on one of the walls that surrounds the ruins. I then said something along the lines of, "Please let me go, I'm really sorry. I won't come back here again. I just want to go home, please. I'm sorry." Or something along the lines of that. And after that, I grabbed my bike and went down into the swamp, still looking back only partially. Luckily, it turned out it wasn't a large swamp or anything, really just a wet patch for about 200 meters until the ground sloped downwards again, then upwards. Still, it took a while because of the bike to get out of and really hurt my calves. And I can't really see anymore and was constantly stepping into puddles getting stuck. When I emerged on the other side, I was absolutely soaked in sweat, and my heart is absolutely pounding. And then, wouldn't you know it, the trees opened up, and there it is, the logging road. I could have cried with joy and relief in that moment. I stepped onto the road and turned to look behind me, but I can't even see the swamp through the trees now. It's almost pitch black there, but luckily there's some moonlight, and the light on the bike also worked. I climb on my bike, pedaling home as quick as I can. About half an hour later, I even had some cell phone reception for a moment, so I can call my mum and tell her what happened. Well, I told her I got lost. I didn't want her to know that I worked myself into a panic and got into a dangerous situation, that I had a horrible feeling I couldn't shake of being followed. By the time I arrived to our own cabin, I'm completely exhausted and overwhelmed by what's just happened. It's honestly almost putting me into a state of shock thinking of it. I have no idea what was out there, following me or watching me. I don't know why there were so many taxidermy animals in there and it was full of moss and mould. I can't believe something was out there stalking me in the darkness for God knows how long. I've never had a feeling like it in my entire time out in the wilderness since, or before then. It still gives me nightmares to this day. I was 12 or so at the time. Some friends of mine are in the Girl Scouts and invite me to join them for a sleepover at this old sanitarium in Maine, just north of San Francisco. At this time, 50 years ago now, the building's not in the best of conditions. There was an old caretaker's cabin and some outbuildings. My friend and I wandered around and explored for the first day, Saturday, and well, we're not the best behaved little monsters. In spite of the locked door, we crawled through a window into the caretaker's cabin exploring there. My friend went upstairs and I stayed in the downstairs part as a sentry. Already nervous, I was even more jumpy when I heard someone coming down the stairs, but it wasn't my friend. There was no one there, at least I can see. Now fast forward to one evening. In an attempt to go to sleep, we were overtaken by giggles. Now, one of the counsellors separated us so the others can sleep. I was placed in bed in this little sunroom thing. It was an enclosed room, but with windows on 3 walls. Now, the wall I'm facing actually has a set of French doors and a balcony. Now I'm awoken by a strange sound. It's about 3 in the morning, and everyone else is asleep. I then watch a woman in an old-fashioned dress walk past the doors through to the balcony, look at me, then descend the stairs silently. I figure out it's just a counsellor, until I wake up in the morning and realise that there's no stairs. We explored every acre of that place and never found any signs of where she could have went. And none of the counsellors were up at that time either. Now I'm not one to believe in the paranormal, but I had one experience I simply cannot explain in any other way. So my family owns this old cabin out in the wilderness. It's half derelict, and to be honest, I don't even stay in there because I hate the spiders that I know are above me. I instead sleep outside in my tent. And one night, I'm doing exactly that, thinking, wow, I'm glad I'm in here, not in there with all them spiders and the real danger. At that very moment, I can hear a piano in the background. I think my phone's on, so I go and check it, but it's on charge and there's no sound coming from it. I unzip the tent, and I can see a torch and a white piano. I've rubbed my eyes because this makes literally no sense to me, and this is where the sound's coming from. I pull out my binoculars and sure enough, there's a piano with a torch next to it, and sound coming from it. Hell no, I think to myself. I look around for people and see no one. I go inside the tent again, going to get my rifle because I'm very scared now. Just as I come into the tent, the sound stops. I come out of the tent and it's gone. Only the torch remains, but it's been knocked over. My dog is absolutely terrified at this point too, so I know something's up. I grab my stuff near my tent and just get the hell out of there with my dog. I've never been back there since, and I still have no logical explanation for this whatsoever. I really wish I had a reasonable answer, but I have none, and I've never seen anything like it. Me and my dad and younger brothers and mum were all staying in this lovely cabin out in the forest one winter. It was close to Christmas time and we love staying out there. We're a wilderness family and my dad's big on hunting, so this was a great time for us, and I have a lot of my most fond memories here. Now one night we're staying in the cabin and my mum just can't sleep. My dad says she's just being paranoid and that she could go back to bed, but she refuses to. Just as I wake up, and my brother does to hear this, we hear an extremely high-pitched sound that we've never heard before, and literally, all of the windows simultaneously blow out on the cabin. My mum and dad don't take a second to react, rush us into the car. My dad gets his shotgun and does a quick sweep around. He can't find anything. I never seen him look so scared, and hops back into the car and we drive out of there. A few years later we get the windows replaced, but we end up selling the place. When I speak to my mum and dad about it to this day, they still get very scared and say they really don't have an answer for what happened. When I was younger, I used to love go exploring the woods and forest with my friend. Now, we used to have to lie about what we were actually doing, because there's no way in hell that any parents in their right minds are going to let their kids do this. But we were lying and did so anyway. Now we set off like normal one day, and it began to rain heavily. I already slipped on a rock and ended up twisting my ankle, so I wanted to go home. However, my friend, James, wanted to stay out later. I was hesitant but said fine because I had nothing better to get on with. So we're going about exploring when we realise how dark it's getting. Not to worry, we have flashlights. We shine our lights around and hit a dark object. We both focus our lights simultaneously and hey, it's a cabin. It's a really old looking one too. We both look at each other and smile, really excited to go and explore in there. My friend James says as a joke, last one to get there is a loser, and jogs off, and what happens no less than 4 seconds later? Twist his ankle like me. He's in some pain, but I literally cannot stop laughing. I still think it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I eventually catch up with him and say we've really got to get heading home now, but not before we explore in here. As we're doing so, I get this horrible feeling like we're being watched. Something just feels off and I don't know what it is. I get worried maybe an animal's in there, so decide to throw a log in. As I do so, I hear an extremely loud thump sound and snap. It scares the life out of me and I actually fall over. I can't believe you're that scared, man, my friend says to me, and I say sharp, I didn't think the floor was that weak. I threw it through the window, but it also props the door open. And as it does so, to my horror, I can see this place has been booby-wrapped with a bear trap, and I've just set it off, and some other trap in the background that I can't actually see. And the feeling of being watched? It's getting worse now. We both look at each other terrified, knowing that we can't even run if we want to. We both link arms and kind of support each other's hurt legs, and get out of there as quick as we possibly can. We both swore never to tell our parents what happened, but looking back on it now, it's absolutely horrifying to think that someone booby-trapped a cabin in the middle of the woods, obviously trying to lure people in. And that was almost us. If it wasn't for some stupid injuries, my friend would have sprinted in there and trapped himself, and God knows what would have happened, or it could have been myself. Over the years, I've had a handful of scary stories, but by far, this is the most weird. I grew up in the South, with tons and tons of beautiful places to see that haven't been taken over by concrete yet. It's nice, but along with that, it's boring. Being a teenager, I wanted to go out and have fun, led to mostly improvising with your buddies and hoping something good will come out of the night. There wasn't really a local spot to go hang out at like a club or cool bar, and the places that were close to this were boring because you did them so many times. I'm sure if you lived in a rural area, you can understand that feeling completely. Something that I found is a ton of employment in as a teen was just cruising around super late listening to music. I would fill up my gas tank, grab something to drink, and I would just drive around until the sun came up. It's just a way for me to clear my head and relax. The country roads were always fun to drive around at 2 AM. Well, one night, I absolutely get more than I bargained for. I can't remember what month it is exactly, but I know for a fact that it's summertime because I'm out of school, and I also remember it being a comfortably chilled night. So, if I was to guess, it had to be around June or August. I was cruising around like I always did and was worry-free, having my music blaring in my zone. I decided to head down to a park out of boredom. This particular park is at the very end of a long stretch of desolate country road, but is a really pretty drive because of that. When I say desolate country road, I don't mean that it's some dirt road that goes through the woods or anything crazy. By this I mean that it's a normal paved road, but there is nothing on it after a certain point. The entire road takes about 20 minutes to drive down to get to the park, and after about 10 minutes into the drive, houses start to spread out further and further to become no houses, and just a road leading to a park. I think a lot more of the reasons I like driving at night is because how crazy it looks, and it's kind of an adventure. The park isn't open for camping or anything. It's mostly just a lot of land with walking trails and biking trails set up through miles of woods. So obviously at around 3 in the morning it's pretty dead. I made it there and just did a slow normal little loop around drive of the park. The night before it stormed so badly I remembered my parents had to take shelter because of a possible tornado. There ended up being no tornadoes, but the storms are rough. Because of this, I came up to a fallen tree in the road that looped around to the exit on the other side of the park that must have been where the storm was. It wasn't some massive tree or anything, but I know for a fact that there's no way I would have gotten over it in my car, obviously. It's pitch black everywhere, besides the front of my car because of my headlights, and because of that, I immediately ruled out backing up the entire way. I just drove when I entered that way. I knew it was super dangerous and there was no way. At this point on the road, there was flat land on either side of me. I figured that it would make the most sense just to back up in the grass beside me a little and then drive back the way I came. It was a one-way loop around the park, but I wasn't really worried about going out the wrong way since it's so late. So I started to back off the road so I could just turn my car around. All was good until I went to pull up back on the road. I totally didn't take into account how wet the grass was and the amount of mud. My car goes nowhere. My back tires are completely stuck and they're spinning in place. I was trying to floor the gas pedal. I start to become pretty scared at this point. Not the most ideal of situations to be in. I immediately take out my cell phone out of my pocket, but I've got no service. I have a massive sigh of relief now, but it's sarcastic. I hit my phone and suddenly I have a bar. I call my parents and tell them what happened and where I am. They're annoyed that they're gonna have to pay for a tow truck. Both my parents drive small 4-door sedans, and there'd be zero help in this situation. It's about 45 minutes away from my home, and most of human civilization. So I realize that I'm gonna be stuck out there for at least an hour before someone can get me. It's a weird feeling, but I try getting out of my head and continue listening to music. I mean, there's not much more I can do. After I kind of calmed down from the initial anger I had, I start checking out my surroundings. I didn't even notice at first because of what's going on, but in front of my car's placement is a field full of mostly deer from what I can tell. But there's tons of them. There must have been 50 eating grass. The field isn't directly in front of my car, but if I was to get out and throw a rock in that direction, I could have hit one. Now, this didn't really help out the creepiness that's going on. Look out in front of your car and see ATI reflections is weird. But it's just a field of deer. I watched them for a little bit, but I'm quickly over it and just start to browse through my social media apps. They seem to have been quicker than they usually load. After browsing my phone for about 15 minutes, I finally get a call back from my parents letting me know that a tow truck's on the way, but it's about an hour and a half from me. Still to this day, I remember hearing and having the thought, "You gotta be kidding me." I understood that me and only me was the reason that I'm in this situation, so I can't really be mad at anyone else. But that was very obvious and not what I want to hear. I decided that the smartest thing for me to do is to make sure my doors are locked and lay down and sleep for a bit. So that's what I did. Okay, here we go. So I wake up 45 minutes later to the feeling of being watched. I'm not sure if anyone's ever experienced this before, and I don't know how common it is, but it's as though a sixth sense has went off in your head telling you you must wake up. Waking up to that feeling's not a nice thing. I sit up, immediately checking my surroundings. I see nothing. I look through my car very quickly for any sort of weapon, finding a pocket knife, A pocket knife. I'm very scared now. Even though I saw and heard absolutely nothing, the feeling alone is truly harrowing. I was shocked to see that the field of deer in front of me is still full. I don't know anything about the animal, but I guess I would assume that they don't hang out in the same place for long. Not sure why I thought it, but I was surprised nonetheless. I called my parents back to see if they've heard any updates from the tow truck dude. I decided to not mention the feeling I'm having because I didn't want them to worry more, and I also knew that there's literally nothing they could do to help if I really needed it. So no update from the tow truck guy. Ah, great. The call lasted just a few minutes and I felt like an idiot. They both had to wake up for work in a few hours and now have to spend over $100 on top of all of that and are worried about me. I could tell they're annoyed at the situation but worried. I told them I'll be sure to tell the guy that I'm fine and make sure he hurries and that I'm sorry when he arrives. We hung up and I looked from the phone and immediately went from 0 to 100 in panic mode. The deer in front of me are all completely perked up, staring in the same direction in front of them. Let me remind you that there's around 40 deer in this field. Every single one stopped dead, standing still, staring. I put on my high beams and stared, waiting for anything to happen. Nothing. I tapped my horn real quick. They don't even budge. They are completely still, glued to what's by them. The way the tree line was, I couldn't see that far over. I knew that they're looking into the woods by them, but where? I can't see. I could hear my heartbeat now. I grabbed that stupid pocket knife, just waiting for something to happen. I would say it was about a minute after I honked. Every single one of them in unison starts to run the opposite way, at full speed. I mean, within literally 20 seconds, the field's empty. I'm petrified in fear. I knew staying in my car is the safest thing to do, but it's the worst feeling being a sitting duck. My head's on a swivel. I was freaking out in every possible way. I assumed that it's a bear or something, but it could have been absolutely anything. I was convinced at that point it was the devil himself. I don't know what to do. I knew the tow truck was close by, but I have no idea where he is. I begin to shake because of nerves and look around to make sure nothing's by me. I'm focusing on the field in front of me. I did this for what felt like an actual eternity, sitting in complete silence and complete darkness in the middle of nowhere, waiting for someone to jump out and attack you. 15 minutes go by and I start to see lights break through the tree line. As I get closer, I see the tow truck guy. The lights on his truck felt like Jesus coming from the heavens to rescue me. He gets up to me and I jump out of my car, immediately asking if he has a gun. I told him very quickly what's happened, and something's definitely out nearby. He let me know that he had a shotgun in the truck and assures me that it's a bear or bobcat. He gave me the whole, they're more scared of you than you are of them crap. The tree was small enough for him to sort of bulldoze it out of the way with his truck, and then he attached my car to his, pulling me out of the spot I'm stuck in. He was very nonchalant about what I experienced, but I'm badly shaken up. The whole time he was doing this, I still have my eye glued to the field, just waiting for something to happen. Anything. He was completely done with everything in about 15 minutes, and he told me to follow him out to his truck to the main road again. I get in my car and was ready more than anything to get out of here. We start to drive away from the spot I was in, my head on a swivel, completely shook up. As we're driving away, I look in my rearview mirror. We were down the park road just a tiny bit, but I could still see the spot I was stuck in partially lit up from the vehicle's lights and the moon. I watch in my rearview mirror, and a man comes out of the tree line where my car was, walking into the middle of the road, watching us drive away. My heart stopped beating, legitimately. I lost my breath. My eyes start to fill with tears because how absolutely terrified I am in this moment. I couldn't see any kind of details of what he looks like, or even necessarily what he's wearing. To be honest, I don't care. The feeling that I felt driving away from that spot, knowing that he was right there the whole time watching me. Watching me as I'm freaking out looking around. Watching me as I'm completely alone for a long time. Maybe even coming up to my window, watching me asleep. That's a feeling that is something I can't necessarily put into words. All those years later, it still messes with me. The entire time we're driving off, as long as I can see him, he doesn't move. He watched us in the road. A million things are going through my mind. I was scared there may have been multiple people watching us. I tried to figure out if I should start beating on the horn like crazy or not. I decide that all I want to do is get out of there, more than anything. The second we finally got out of the park and was able to be on a 2-lane road again, I fly past a truck driver doing nothing but 70 the whole way home, flying through stop signs, driving like crazy. I don't care. The only thing on my mind's home. I get inside, running there, very quickly acknowledging my parents and saying sorry and thank you. I went to my room, don't get a second of sleep. I was researching for any records of these things happening here. Escaped convicts, similar stories, etc. I came to the conclusion that the man was a squatter or something. I've read many things online about how people camp out in the woods building shelters. But what's the most scary part for me is what's unknown. What if? There's so many possibilities. I never told my parents this story until years later after it happened, and I'm already an adult. It freaked them out. I never went back to that park or area again, ever. Even though I no longer live there, I will never go back there. And God forbid that this person's caught anyone else out there. Even typing this, I'm having chills up my spine. I hate that this happened so much. I hate the fact that I was asleep there, so vulnerable and completely unaware of the danger around me at the time. Me and my mum have a shared house kind of in the middle of nowhere. Really in the middle of nowhere. We're surrounded by miles and miles of forests. Now, my mum has some medical issues, and sometimes when she's really tired she can hallucinate and see things that aren't really there. So when she saw someone looking in her window at night, she didn't think anything of it. I become a little paranoid and decided to sleep with her one night, and it turns out it wasn't just her medication or problems causing it. There really was someone there. I screamed and it woke up my dad. He quickly grabs a knife and runs outside to try and find whoever it was. But there's no signs of anyone, and 20 years later, we still have no idea who was watching us sleep or for how long they were doing so. So just over 10 years ago, I was fresh out of college and moved back to my parents' house for the free rent/food for 9 months or so before I was leaving the state for graduate school. Now my parents are super chill and gave me my own space in the house, but being a 22-year-old single guy and living at home with my parents is certainly not ideal, but I didn't have any other options, so I started looking for some work to pass the time and save up money. Anyway, so summer turned to winter and I haven't found anything solid, but by then I desperately needed to spend some more time out of my parents' house, so I started looking for some part-time gigs to do and find some light bookkeeping for a small business owner guy that my dad knew. I didn't really want to do it since it didn't pay well, and it was short term, and wasn't even a real office setup. But then again, since my parents live in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest, I knew I had limited opportunities to make money, and this guy was going to pay me well too. About that time, a friend of mine in the city said that if I just paid him $200 a month and tied it up, he'd basically let me crash in the living room until I moved out of state. That's all I need to hear. I took the job. So my dad's friend had a construction type business that helped out with building stuff a little, but was ultimately more focused on renting out a few bobcats and large augers they owned. Also other various drills, then odds like generators and stuff. Now, this was a small mum and pop type thing where everyone knew each other, and the office only opened on days that someone's coming by. And this was just generally a mutually beneficial situation for the business owners and locals. Since I had minored in a business adjacent area and my dad recommended me, they trusted me to go in there for about 20 hours a week, check and file rental forms and make sure no one missed a payment date. The old building where I worked was about 90 years old, sitting on top of a hill, and the downstairs used to be an old country bar until the 70s, when this family bought it cheap, cleared out the bar and fenced in the property to use its parking lot area to store all their rental equipment and gear. I could generally come and go as I pleased, work any hours I wanted, as long as I got the work done. So if things were slow and there weren't any rentals for a couple of days, I'd usually go in after 7 and stay around midnight or 1, since I knew I'd be alone and could listen to music and do what I wanted. The office I worked in was on the second floor of the building above the old bar, and looked out onto the long driveway. From my seat, I can easily see out of the window, and once or twice saw a family of deer or raccoons scamper by, and I always glanced out when I saw movement since it's noticeable. So up here, it's incredibly remote, very still and quiet, so if something unusual occurred, or something felt off, I would definitely notice. Now one night during winter, it snowed a few inches, and my dad told me to stay in case it causes the roads to be bad. But I had an old SUV, and more than that, I just really wanted to get out of the house. So I went to work at about 8 PM, and was gonna stay until after 1. I always left the gate open at the bottom of the hill since, believe me, When I say no one ever showed up because we're in the middle of nowhere, I really mean it. I think the nearest occupied house was about 2 miles down the road, and to even turn onto our short road, you had to only be coming to our Pacific building. It was a locals only type thing too, so I'm jamming away to Fallout Boy. Now everyone makes mistakes when they're young, and having coffee watching the snow outside, when I see an orange reflection there. I'm confused, but it looks interesting. At one point, around midnight, I went downstairs to the big bathroom to do my bathroom business, then coming back upstairs and getting settled into my work. I probably did about 5 minutes of work when I glance outside and see a huge imprint of something in the snow, just below the light. It seemed like a massive dog or substantial animals rolled around there. Since I didn't notice it 15 minutes before, it had to have happened while I was in the bathroom, or maybe back when I was focused on work, since I would have seen that movement for sure. I just shake it off and assume maybe a dog or farm animals came here. It's around 2 in the morning, it's time to leave. And as always, I got out of my car, unlocked the gate, and to be honest, I'd pretty much forgotten about the imprint. But when I looked down, I'm shocked to see that it wasn't just somehow disturbed snow. It was undeniably the imprint of a human-made snow angel. If you don't know what a snow angel is, it's when you lay on your back and move your arms and legs, and it appears to be an angel. I used to do this as a kid, so I 100% knew for sure what it was, and it was deliberately made underneath the light post. But it wasn't from a kid, it's from a very large person, or at the very least, a normal-sized adult wearing tons of layers of big winter clothing. I look up, and saw what I already knew, that whoever had made this snow angel could easily look up and have seen me through the window. So they must have been staring at me to do this. Why else would they have done this here? Now I definitely would have seen or heard someone if they drove up to the building. Someone walked deep into the middle of nowhere in the freezing cold to do this for miles. Literally stopping in front of our building, then doing a snow angel. Weird. I glance around in the tracks. I can see some that lead to the woods. It's clear the person didn't use a road, but instead came from the opposite side, which made me instantly uneasy, since the side was just trees and darkness for miles and miles. I was definitely freaked out, because for once someone's come here, but they've come out of the middle of the woods to do so. I look around but don't see anything amiss at all, and now just want to get the hell out of there. When I get back to my car, I drove a few feet, and I realised that my boss won't be there for 4 hours, and is probably going to see the snow angel and assume I did it. I wouldn't have been that worried, but I was young and felt it's going to be something that's looked down upon from me, so I opened up the back gate and ran it over. Also, as a side note, I should mention that when this happened, the snow starts falling more heavily and I know I won't be able to see much more. I'm stood here absolutely terrified, and that's when I hear it. When I'm getting in my SUV, there's the loudest high-pitched sound laughing that I've ever heard coming from the woods. It sounded like the fake laugh that the witch in the Wizard of Oz made. Like something was doing it in a fake manner on purpose to show that they're not scared of me, or were trying to see how I was going to react to this. My god, I'm scared now. And they're doing this on our property. I knew it was close enough that they could see me, but I can't see them. After a few seconds of laughing, they stopped, and then it's just silence everywhere, except for my heart beating through my ears. Then the laughing starts, louder this time, more like screaming. I panic. Now, I spent a lot of time in that area, and I know what coyotes or foxes sound like, and that's not them. This is a person trying to emulate a woman laughing, like someone deliberately making a fake screech, trying to scare me. Well, it worked. After that 5 seconds, I immediately filled with adrenaline, get in my car, and drove like hell away from there as fast as I can without sliding off the road. Back at home, I was up all night trying to figure out what happened and tell my parents. Now I know it's definitely not anyone I know in the area that would do this because they don't live close by, and they would definitely tell me after if they'd done it. And why would they be out there that late just to prank me in the freezing cold without their car nearby? I didn't do any drugs, I didn't drink, and I have no mental issues or have a history of it in my family. I worked there for another 6 weeks and never had another issue. Though I knew where my boss kept his gun, and I always made sure it was there when I started work. Thinking of that experience, it just terrifies me that they'd been there for hours staring at me, and were waiting for God knows how long to laugh at me. I mean, I don't know how they didn't get hypothermia. It all just terrifies me. Well, where do I start? So let me give some background information first. I grew up in a very rural area. My parents have a pretty big piece of land with a nice 2-story farmhouse in the middle of it. To the south of the house is a peach orchard. The west is where the driveway is. It goes through an alley of cottonwood and peach trees, but the land is pretty open and was used for cattle farming. The east and north is dense woodland and shrubs, which reaches out to our neighbours about 4 miles away. Back then, I was working in a carpenter's shop. I just got my driver's license, and so I'm able to get there on my own. It's about a 1.5 hour drive though. We started fairly late in the day at about 10 AM. Now, the owner of the company was sort of a night owl and loved to sleep in. Because of that, we had to stay until 9 PM. That was no problem in the summer, but turned out to be a bit of an annoyance in the winter, as it got pretty dark early and I hated driving in the dark because the lights on my car weren't the best anymore. I drove a 1987 Chevy pickup, which had seen better days. I didn't have much money on me back then, so this was all I can afford. So one day in late December at about 10 or 11 years back, I left work much later than usual. I had made a pretty stupid mistake on a nightstand I was building for a customer and needed to fix it, as the customer was going to pick it up the next day. When I finally finished, it's around midnight. I cast out on my stupidity, closed the shop up tight and went to my car. There are 2 routes I can take to get home. One is on a highway, the other is through backcountry and dirt roads surrounded by thick brush and trees. I usually took the highway as it was much faster and safer, especially in dark. But this day, the highway's blocked by police because of an accident, so I took the long way home. As soon as I left the main road and made my way up dirt trails, I got this feeling, you know the one, as though something bad's about to happen, almost like an impending doom. The longer I drove on the road, the stronger the feeling I got, until it was like all of my body and soul was aching desperately to turn around, drive back all the way to the roadblock and wait until it got opened again. I tried to suppress it as best I could, and tried to convince myself that I have driven this route many of times before and I know it's safe. I'm driving on an especially tough piece of brush, and all of a sudden, my left tire popped. I did my best to keep the truck on the road and make it to a safe stop. I kept a spare tire in the toolbox, and had changed tires quite a lot on my own, so I knew it'd just be a minor inconvenience, and I'd be rolling again in a matter of minutes. That's where I was wrong. I climb up on the truck's bed, only to find that my toolbox has been broken into, and all my tools and spares have been stolen. So there I was, miles away from the nearest settlement in bear and wolf country, in the middle of the night with no cell phone or way to repair the truck. I always kept a sort of survival kit in my toolbox with a blanket, axe, fire starter, and some MREs. But it had gotten stolen too. Thank God I still had my trusty knife my sister gave me when she moved to Finland. So I made the second, but bigger mistake of the day, deciding to walk home. To this day, I still don't know why I made this decision. All I had to do was wait in my truck until sunrise, as I knew a neighbour was driving this route every day at around 8 AM. He could have taken me to town and called my parents to get the truck, but I said nah, I'm walking home. So when I went, I locked the car, took my rucksack with my belongings with me, and started walking. I couldn't have had walked for far when I got this eerie feeling like somebody's watching me. I turn around, but nothing's there. I pick up the pace to make it out of there. All of a sudden, I heard some rustling in the brushes to my left. I call out if anyone's in there, but of course, I get no answer. The feeling of being watched becomes stronger and stronger, the rustling more frequent, when suddenly the brush stopped and I come into a small clearing. That's when he spoke to me for the first time. "Hey there, boy," with a weird pronunciation. The first part was spoken soft, almost gently, but the boy was like an explosion to me. He made a tiny pause in between, then spewing out "boy." He's big, I guess about 6'6", wearing a long trench coat, hat, grey short hair, lifeless eyes like a dead fish. That's what really scared me. But then I see his dog. It's a massive black shepherd-like dog, looking almost like a wolf. I've never seen anything like it. I froze immediately out of fear. I hear this term, but could never imagine it being like this. I can't move. I just can't. I tried, trust me, God did I try. "What you doing there, boy?" he said to me. "Don't you want to talk to me, boy?" I still can't move a finger, but my mouth slowly starts working again. I told him about my truck, how I'm gonna try and walk home, but I don't think he was able to understand a word I'm saying, as I'm stuttering and slurring the words because of fear. He made a step towards me, his dog fixated on me like prey. He came so close I can smell this weird smell. Now there's something else I can't quite point out. I still stood there, unable to move. He took a deep breath, closes his eyes, almost like he wanted to remember the smell of fear radiating from me. He started to grin. Not a genuine, honest grin, but One of those whose eyes weren't involved, like he was somewhere else. Then, stayed lifeless as they were. Be careful out there, boy. There are a lot of dangerous things out there, boy. And he vanishes into the brush, just as sudden as he's appeared. I started to throw up. My body moves again. All of a sudden, my knees feel weak, like I can't bear the weight of my own body. I collapse to the ground. My whole body starts to shake uncontrollably, and I sob with relief. As soon as I regain control over my body once again, I run. I ran like I've never ran before. I ran all the way home, which is quite a long way. I can't describe the feeling of relief coming over me when I saw the old familiar porch lights coming on and I reached the edge. Hey there, boy, I hear again. My heart skipped a beat. I scream in sheer terror, and I knew that this is going to be the end of my life. I freeze again, so I didn't stop running. God. I ran and ran and ran, and never even bothered to look back. Only when I reached the warm yellow circles of light cast by our front porch did I dare to look back. And there he stood, on the edge of the woods like he did on the clearing, with his wolf on a leash. He grins at me creepily again. I fumble out my keys as my parents locked the back door at 8 p.m. Unlocked the back door and stumbled in. Only when I've locked the door do I feel safe again. I went upstairs to my room and made sure that all of the windows were locked and the doors. When I look out of the window, he's gone. I told my dad about this when we got to the truck the next day, and he knew nothing about it. I've never been in graver danger than that. The sheer size of him was scary enough. I'm just thankful that I got out in one piece. My dad owns a small cabin up in the Midwest. Now, it was snowing heavily at the time of this incident. I was staying there on my own. I liked how secluded it was, I could really free my mind there. One night while I'm staying there, the snow's falling heavily. I just love looking outside the window, relaxing. I have the small fire going. I'm listening to music on my phone and really enjoying myself when I hear some kind of high-pitched sound. I can't figure out quite what it is. I wonder if it's something the fire's done. Taking out my earphones, I check, and that's fine. My attention goes back towards my bed area, and that's when I see some condensation from my face, clearly on the window. I go to rub it off, and my heart drops. I see a handprint, and go to rub that. It won't disappear. These have been made on the outside of the window. I have no option but to investigate. I'm worried that my dad or brothers come to see me and can't get in. I grab my rifle and head out. I can see footprints leading up to the window. I call out Dad and Jerry, my brother. I get no reply. I decide to follow them. Why on earth would they be up here without telling me, I think to myself. I follow the tracks a little further when suddenly, they stop. And the ones I'm following are clear as day. That's when I hear the high-pitched sound again, and I bolt it immediately to my car. I don't even bother getting my belongings. Something's terribly wrong here. I drive all the way home during the night time and only tell my dad the following morning. Him and my brother are both at home, nowhere near the cabin. Now what's worse is they've also reported hearing some weird sounds and seeing strange lights at night. To this day I have no idea what it was, but it terrifies me so much. In 2003, I'm 6 years old. At the time, I live in a small condo. It's 1 bedroom, 1 bath and a connected living room and kitchen with an island in between and a spiral staircase with random miscellaneous things sorted under it. I was living with my dad, with a mother who was out of the picture. It was Saturday, and I remember specifically watching Codename Kids Next Door on TV in the bedroom after waking up. My dad worked a lot, but was such a nice guy that he left the TV on with Cartoon Network playing, which was my favourite channel. During a commercial, I got up to go pee, and even though I knew I was home alone, I closed the door out of instinct. God, am I glad about that. The next thing I comprehended was the sound of an incredibly noisy spiral stairs. That can be heard literally across the condo because of how small it is. Beginning to rapidly make noises that got quieter and quieter over the course of the next few seconds, telling me that whatever made the sound was fast. As a 6-year-old, this was extremely concerning because, as I said, my dad always turned the TV on before he left work, and I knew he was long gone. So what did I do? Well, as any paranoid 6-year-old would do, when they think they half imagined it, I walk out of the bathroom and look over the 3-foot railing across from the bathroom door and next to the stairs where you walk down. And what did I see? None other than an afraid looking man looking into my living room, staying hidden under the stairs. After being terrified in the bathroom, I made a distinct effort to be quiet, so there's no way he knew I was looking at him. But he more than likely knew I was in the house somewhere. Practically guaranteed now. Okay, so there's a man in the house. I can A, yell at him to leave and maybe be murdered with literally no one around to help. Or B, I can hide, and I opt for B. I wait for what felt like hours, but in reality, it's about 20 minutes, until I heard shuffling downstairs for about a minute. Then, the sound I was praying for, the front door opening. I was still extremely skeptical, even thinking it's a trap to lure me downstairs. So I stay up, all day. Until my dad came home, who I didn't tell about the whole incident. Out of fear, I should have had, thinking he was going to get mad I didn't approach him. The crazy part? Nothing valuable was missing from the home. But you sure as hell know that I checked under the stairs every morning for the next 4 years of living there. Why he was there I have no idea. How he was there, I think he come in through a window, but I'm not sure. It's just truly terrifying though, thinking of it now. When I was about 6 or so, my family lived in an older 2-story house. My stepfather would be the first to tell you about the spooky house and the vibe it had. I often felt strange things happen, but only once was there ever an event with multiple witnesses, yet no explanation. My parents went out one night and left my older brother in charge of my younger and I. The master bedroom is upstairs, and my parents left the window cracked. Now we're all relaxing in the living room, and outside, the wind had begun to pick up. I was already on edge because of the noises the house makes in the wind. My mum was very religious at the time. In the centre of the bed, after making it in the morning, she placed her large, hardcover King James Bible. It weighs a good few pounds. Well, as we're watching TV, we heard an extremely loud thump. We all look at each other, all knowing it come from upstairs. We go to investigate, and there on the floor is her Bible. We check the room, no one's there. And not enough time for someone to get back out. Somehow, this massive book has fallen off the bed without anything else being disturbed. We left it as it was, and our mum questioned us about it when we got home. My dad checked the window inside for evidence of anyone, but there was none. Nothing was taken or disturbed, only the Bible. This happened over a year ago. Our oldest son, Camden, was 3 at the time, and our youngest son, Connor, was around 5 months old. It still gives me chills and still makes me uncomfortable even walking by it. It was January evening in PA. It was dark outside with a couple of inches of snow on the ground. We had just finished eating dinner, and I planned on giving our little one a bath. My husband drives trucks for work, so isn't home very often. It is me and the boys during the week. Now Caden's in his room playing with a toy at the time, and there's a sliding door leading to a deck. A little detail, we have no sensor or even porch light on that side of the house. At the time, we didn't use the deck at all, only to use our grill during the summer months. It is not close to the sidewalk or the next street over though, so basically it's an open space of yard off that deck. Anyway, Caden was playing in his room, waiting for his turn to have a bath while I brought Connor into the room. We were just about done with the bath time when I heard Caden's little feet running towards the bathroom. He stands away from the door and says, "Mum, there's a man looking in the side door. I think it's a mailman." Now my heart skips a beat because 1, no mailman's coming at 7 PM, and 2, the side door, as he called it, was never used. Especially not in the winter. I didn't hear a knock. I began to sketch myself out, more by thinking about how there's no light there, and one person is literally gonna have to walk through the yard in the snow, walk up the back stairs of the deck, and go to that door where the front porch light was on. So now I take Connor out of the bath, put him in a towel in his little chair, and told Caden to sit with his brother and not to come out until I said it was okay. He was confused but listens, just keeps asking what's wrong. I grabbed the biggest knife I can find, had 911 ready to call, and go get my mum a bare face on. When I walked to the side door, I shined the flashlight on my phone through the window of the door at a distance, walking up to it hopefully to scare someone away from it. Now the absolute worst fault that I have with this as a mother is that as I reach for the handle, it's unlocked. Someone could have walked right in. I flung the door open, shined my light, held up my knife and yelled "Hey!" in the most threatening voice a 5'4", 120-pound woman could make. There were footprints in the snow up the deck stairs and going down into the field and woods behind our home. I slammed the door, thoroughly freaked out, and locked it. I called the police and waited in the bathroom with the boys. While I was in there, I asked Caden, "Do you know who that man was?" And he said no, but he smiled and waved for a long time. I asked him what he was wearing. He said it looks like a mailman's uniform. The police officer came and searched the property with flashlights before coming inside. He asked me and Caden questions, and then informed me that he not only saw footprints leading up to the side deck, but to the door of our basement and kitchen window on the other side. He then suggested that I have someone come and stay with us for the fortnight, and they're going to continue to follow the footprints that are left in the snow into the wood line. My father-in-law slept on the couch that night, with his guns being the closest relative to our house. My mother was a nervous wreck. I got very little sleep that night, and I never heard back from the police. I'm assuming the tracks were loose through the woods. Caden still mentions it from time to time, but I'm just terrified of this now. I pray it never happens again. This happened a while ago, so my recollection can't be word for word, but here it is. I'm a teenager. Me and my mum live alone. We basically live in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town is a little less than an hour away, and even being close to a gas station is a very hard thing to find here. We're literally miles away from anything. I know everyone who lives near me, and we rarely ever see new people in our area of the woods. So just seeing someone who isn't familiar is suspicious enough. So this is pretty creepy. Now, a couple of years ago, it's the middle of the night. Me and my mum are night owls. We like to be awake from midnight to 6 AM, the period that most people are asleep for. My mum was watching TV in the living room. I was using the computer in the kitchen. The kitchen and the living room are basically connected, so I wasn't too far away from her, only a few feet. The front door leads to the living room. It's a door with 9 windows, so it's pretty easy to see in. My mum looks towards the door, and she saw somebody staring at her through the window. He's wearing a hood that obstructed almost all of his face, and my mum jumped, and she of course walked into the door, asking him what the hell's he doing. According to my mum, he looked pretty young, but she could barely see his face. The man said something along the lines of, "Can you help my car, please?" in a tone I can only describe as miserable and off-putting. Even though it was dark out, there should have been a light from the car. She can see there's no car, and the man's holding his pockets really tight. My mum said no and apologised, causing him to grip whatever's in his pocket even tighter. So tight it makes his arm tremble. He stayed for a few more minutes and then swiftly disappeared. Throughout the night, maybe 1 or 2 hours later, we'd hear slight weeping, but we didn't see anyone at any of our doors or windows. Now, I may be making an assumption here, but I can only assume it was a weapon he was holding in his pocket. This was a creepy as hell experience. It's safe to say that he was blatantly gonna lure my mum out of the house to do God knows what to her. A year ago, there was a very small metal plate jammed between the front door strike plate and the piece that goes inside of it. We have no idea how this got here, but the metal stopped the doors from locking. So I'm assuming it was put there so someone can get in later. I'm worried these things are related. I hope this never happens again. I was home alone in my previous apartment in a not so great neighbourhood. My apartment was on the ground level and my bedrooms facing a back alley. A dumpster sat less than 2 car lengths away. Homeless people often rummage through it. Now just before dawn one morning, I hear a tapping on the window. My back was to the window, my eyes are now wide open. It's still dark outside, and I sleep with my lamp on, and my worn out vertical blinds are missing a slate, causing a gap. So now it's clear in my mind that whoever or whatever the source of the tapping could now see me lying in bed, plain as day. The tapping was brief, maybe 5 or 6 taps. So I spent the next 5 seconds or so frozen, bizarrely trying to convince myself it was something/anything else but a person watching me and tapping on my window. Please God, let it be an animal. But then, more tapping. Now I was faced with the terrifying reality that someone had been watching me through my window in the dark for God knows how long, and he'd decided to tap on the window. Had one of the homeless people become aggressive during their dumpster dives? Something told me that nothing good was going to come from this. Now remember, my back was to the guy, so I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes, pretending that I'm too groggy to hear him. I stand up hazily, made my way out of the bedroom as I was going to the bathroom or something. Once I was out of his sight, I ran to the phone and dialed 911, considering whether to forget my embarrassment of being in my t-shirt and underwear, and bolting out my front door, which is out of sight from the intruder. I just wasn't sure if I could outrun whoever it was, or whether anyone would help me if I couldn't. Before I make a decision, I hear a loud pop of my window being pried open. I thought my heart would jump through my chest. At the same time, I could hear my upstairs neighbour Mike descending down his stairs. I opened my door a few inches and peeked out to ask for his help. Mike's a big guy, and I heard he was trained in martial arts of some sorts. He didn't hesitate to respond, hustling to the back of my apartment to see what's going on. Within seconds, I heard rumbling and someone being thrown against a wall to the bushes. A few moments later, Mike came out to my front door telling me not to worry again. He'd beaten him up pretty bad. I wanted to believe Mike, that the would-be intruder was maybe dumpster diving, but that he would never do so again. But it gets worse. It wasn't a homeless person according to Mike. When the guy escaped, he ran to the front of my building, hopped into a red sports car and sped off. My neighbourhood isn't a red sports car kind of place. The police later told me that the intruder's likely someone who's seen me before and is stalking me. So window tapper, I still wonder what would have happened if you got inside and Mikey wasn't there to intervene. I don't know if you still follow me, and because of that, I'm scared. This encounter happened when I was about 10. My sister and I were home alone since it was during the summer. Both our mum and my grandmother were busy, so they could not stay at home with us. We were used to being home alone during the summer, so it's no big deal. The only thing we could do was not go outside or open the door to anyone. During this day, I had gotten up and started to play Sims 2 in our kitchen. My sister was watching TV in our den. A few hours into our game, I hear the doorbell ring. At first I thought it was my game, but I have the sound off. So I asked my sister if she heard the doorbell ring, and she replies she hasn't. She said it was probably just a show she was watching. I brushed it off and went back to my game. About 10 minutes later, I see a reflection on my computer of a man in a suit, his hands cupped around his eyes, looking through the glass door behind me. I turn around to be face to face with this strange man that I've never seen before. I had no idea how long he'd been there watching me. He waved at me like he knew me from somewhere. I call my sister's name, and the man hasn't been noticed by her yet. She grabs the phone quickly to call out to her grandmother. Now, we had seen the salesperson before. None of them look like this guy. He's wearing a full black suit that doesn't fit him. It was not strange enough that this guy was wearing a full suit in 99 degrees. He was also carrying a briefcase. All the salespeople I'd seen only ever carried a clipboard and some flyers. But this guy, a briefcase. All the salespeople had also come at different times of the day. The next flag that came with this guy, he walked around our house coming to the back door, which during his little trip, you would have seen that there's not a car in the driveway, indicating no one's home. As I was getting up to hide, the man reaches down, grabbing the doorknob, beginning to jiggle it forcefully. Thank God it's locked. He now begins to smile, gesturing at me to come unlock the door for him. All the noise he had been making had now set off our 75-pound lab mix, making her go crazy. No way was she gonna let the guy off. My sister tells my grandmother, and apparently she's on her way. She wants us to hide in the back of her house until she could get home. My sister hands me the phone, then turns into the kitchen to grab the biggest knife we have. I can hear her yelling at the guy that we called the cops. She comes back into the room and we shut the door. She tells me after she lied to the guy about calling the cops, but he starts laughing. A little while later, we hear the door open and my grandmother calling us. We come out to meet her. She tells us that she did not see a man anywhere in sight. She had walked around the whole house before unlocking the door. She also thought it was weird if he was a salesperson, he wouldn't have stayed around. She ended up taking the rest of the day off to be with us. Also, she could watch us now in case he comes back. It's been 11 years since this encounter took place and I still have no idea who that man was or what he wanted.